Good afternoon, YouTube. This is Sorabel speaking. I am going to actually talk about a in-depth analysis on my Dragonmaid deck profile. Um, I've made some changes since my recent PPG top using the deck. I think the most glaring issue between then and now is that I've actually increased my deck size by 15 cards. I now play at a comfortable 60. And I kind of want to explain my logic and my reasoning behind why I play 60 cards as opposed to playing the traditional 40 or even the 45 that I felt I was comfortable playing on during the event, right? So I kind of want to, we should probably separate some things and talk about the star cards, the cards that advance your game state, right? Your starters. I think the starters for any combo deck is probably the most important part. But there's a level of redundancy that I should think that is important as well. For example, what I mean by redundancy is the idea that a lot of your cards in your deck should do the same thing, but how could I rephrase this? You don't want to play a deck with 15 Monster Reborns, right? Because if those Monster Reborns do nothing besides be Monster Reborns, then you've kind of limited yourself in what your deck is capable of, right? But if you play a deck where your cards are starters and they do other things while simultaneously doing things like being Monster Reborn. Like, for example, Black Metal Dragon and Chamber are both Monster Reborns because of the cards that they search, but there are also normal summons that can get your play started, whereas Kitchen and Starly Seyfert are not Monster Reborns, so they can only really get your play started. That's why I would say these two are probably the least good starters. They're strong cards, but they don't really move your game state in any meaningful way with your other starters, right? So Chamber Dragonmaid and Parlor Dragonmaid are both Monster Reborns, and they're both search cards. They themselves count as 2 dragons, and for the 2 combos I'm going to show you today, there's a very important fundamental line that the combos have to meet. The first is Spheres plus Show, which involves a route that requires 3 dragons, one of which needs to be normal summoned. I'll explain why once we get to that point. And the second one is a lot more freeform and similar to Dragon Link, and that is the 4 dragon combo, which just requires a dragon that represents 2 cards and any reborn card that you may have. So let's start from the top. Chamber Dragonmaid is probably the second most powerful Dragonmaid, but she's really strong, right? She can search Dragonmaid Hospitality, Dragonmaid Changeover, and Dragonmaid Tidying. The best part about Chamber specifically is that if you open Chamber and you open Dragonmaid Hospitality, you've opened 4 dragons, right? You've not opened 2, you've opened 4. And the reason why I say that is because if you normal summon Dragonmaid Chamber and you search Dragonmaid Hospitality, you can link the Chamber off into Striker Dragon and reborn the Chamber with Hospitality to make Dragoonity Knight Romulus. Then you can search Dragon Ravine, send the Dragonmaid Tidying that you searched with Dragonmaid Chamber to dump Nurse Dragonmaid from your deck, then banish the same Dragonmaid Tidying to special summon Dragonmaid Nurse, who can then special summon Dragonmaid Chamber and become LP and Piston. So you have Romulus, LP, and Piston. Those are the 4 dragons that you need for that combo setup. Meanwhile, if you open her with, let's say, World Legacy Guard Dragon, right, on the 3 combo path, this can be done with any dragon that's not safer due to his attack points being too high, but you can make Salamangreat Almirage reborn the chamber with hospitality and make Dragonmaid, Dragonmaid LP. I'm sorry, Guard Dragon LP. Then you can move the LP and special summon a dragon from the deck. So you have ways to cheat around the dragon count, but the fundamental idea is that unless you're using World Legacy Guard Dragon, you need 3 dragons for Spheres plus Show and 4 dragons for VFD combos. Parlor Dragonmaid fulfills the same exact niche. So everything I said about Chamber Dragonmaid applies to Parlor. If you open her with Hospitality, you can dump Tidying. If you open Parlor with, let's say, Noctovision Dragon, you can dump Tidying. The only thing you don't want to open Parlor with is Tidying itself, unless you have another Reborn card, in which case that Tidying isn't necessarily doing anything, or you have another extender that can put itself on board. So White Dragon, Wyvern Buster, Noctovision Dragon, Black Metal Dragon also combos with Chamber due to being able to summon Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon, and then special summoning Parlor from the hand. I'm sorry, I meant Parlor. So these 3 monsters actually combo with each other, right? You can reach your desired 4 dragon count by opening any of these 3. And that's really strong for redundancy. Then we get down to Nurse Dragonmaid. She's technically not a starter, but she is a normal summon, so that means with a bit more help she can establish your board, but we play her at 1, so you really shouldn't be opening Nurse. Safer, on the other hand, is a bit more complicated to talk about because he does not full combo with any other normal summon in your deck, which is a huge downside, but he does full combo with any Reborn card. So Dragonmaid Hospitality, Dragonmaid Tidying, Foolish Burial Goods, who represents Dragonmaid Tidying, and World Legacy Guard Dragon, of course. So unlike this first row who combo with all of these cards to fulfill our desired setup, he only does the Reborn half. And Kitchen is similar to that. She does not combo with any of her fellow Dragonmaids or Black Metal Dragon or Safer, but she does combo with all of these Reborn cards with the exception of Tidying. As it is, you would need Foolish Burial Goods in order for her to combo into Tidying. And because of that reason, Kitchen ends up only being able to do 3 card combos. Not 3 card combos, 3 dragon combos as 2 card, unless you have an additional extender like Noctovision Dragon, in which case she can then fulfill the niche of doing the 4 card combos. So that's why I play her at 2. She's probably the worst one, the hardest to get going, but she's still good enough for what I need her to do. And the goal was to reach a certain amount of starters, right? Because at 40 cards, I played 12 starters. I just played Chamber, I played Parlor, I played Black Metal Dragon, and that was it. I did not play Kitchen, I did not play Safer. And I found that my deck was super consistent. I had a 85% chance to see a starter. And then at the time I played 9 hand traps, which was just Gamma, Nibiru, and Ghost Ogre. And I had a 75% chance to see any of the hand traps. So I decided to up that to 45. And doing that, I added Chaos Space, right? And that allowed me to keep my starter count at 80 that allowed me to keep my starter count at 86%. So around, not 80, it's actually higher, but like 1% is marginal. But my starter count was the same. And then I was able to add 3 additional hand traps. So I added Effect Failure at that time, and I had an 81% chance. So my deck got more consistent by adding in more cards, right? But then I wanted more extenders to help push me through hand traps, right? And this is after I had played through the event, after I had made it through second. I made second place facing against Ruben's Dragon Link. And I decided that if I could keep my starter ratio the exact same, right? So around 86%, I could play more cards to help me extend. And if I could keep my hand trap ratio within 5% of where it was before, I could play more extenders. And so that's what I did. I added in 5 extra starters. No, I added in 7 extra starters. That would be Star League Safer, 2 Kitchen, Gold Sarcophagus, which is a starter with an asterisk because it requires you to use Tempest, which messes up parts of the combo later, but it still works for the 3 Dragon card combo. And then 1 for 1 as a 4th copy of Black Metal Dragon. Right? So I ended up with, at 60 cards, 86% chance to see a starter, which is the exact same as I was at 45 and the exact same where I was at 40. So my consistency to get my play started did not decrease. I was able to add in, I want to say, I was originally playing 12 hand traps, and so I added in 4 more. So now I play 16, not counting driver, of course. And my chance to see a hand trap is now 80%. So it's the exact same, right? My deck is bigger, but the probability of me getting my play started is the exact same. I have a very diverse lineup of hand traps. And so the real benefit of doing this was is that I was able to stuff in more meat and more cushion. So now I can open Foolish Burial Goods and potentially dump Dragonmaid Changeover without requiring one of these 2 to do it, which means Parlor now can dump Tidying for safety against Nibiru, or Chamber can now search Hospitality for safety against Nibiru, or I could have Chambers search Changeover, and I can have Foolish Burial Goods for Tidying, and then Parlor can dump a big dragon, or she can dump Nurse. Like, my cards can do different things because of the redundancy, and the redundancy is only beneficial because my probability didn't decrease. World Legacy Guard Dragon, as something I initially didn't play but I wanted to play, was able to make it into as one of the better extenders due to it representing a dragon in its own right. Because you can by being able to move your dragon zones, you delay the opportunity that you need to waste on summoning a dragon for the Pisty, right? Because you can use the LP effect, special summon a dragon, then use that dragon's effect and use that dragon for Pisty, as opposed to having to burn a Reborn card to get 4 dragons initially. So you keep that Reborn card for this boy right here, just in case things go south, right? Like, your card advantage increases just by having this card. So it made more sense to increase my deck size and keep everything the same. So yeah, as far as Chaos Space goes, like Chamber, Parlor, and Black Metal Dragon, Chaos Space, and Safer, Chaos Space represents 2 dragons, but it actually represents 3 cards due to its draw effect. So when you send a light or dark monster, doesn't matter what it is, you can search one of these 2 and special summon it by banishing the card you discarded, then link it off for Striker Dragon, search the other one, banish that one, and special this guy, right? Then you can banish Chaos Space, shuffle the dragon you just banished for the summon of the second, and draw a card. Then link this card, link the one you searched and Romulus for, link the one you searched in Striker Dragon for Romulus. So your card advantage just increased by a great deal, and it still represented 2 dragons. I'm sorry if I'm fumbling over my words. This is my first time doing something like this. So it's a very strong starter card, if not a bit too... There can be situations where it can be rather clunky if you don't open a light or dark monster, but our hand trap lineup accommodates that very well, I would say. I only think that the main reason I went out of my way to make sure I could play Chaos Space is simply because it preserves your normal summon. That can be huge for later on in a game, depending on the hand traps that you take, what you can hold, what cards you don't have to use, or you can wait for a certain second. It combos very nicely with Noctivision Dragon. You really just want to be counting cards when you play combo decks. So when you start if you start with 5 cards in your combo deck, right? You either want to end, you always want to end with more than what you started with. The only exception would be if your board is just applies too much pressure for your opponent to handle, if that makes sense. So for example, VFD himself, the combo that uses him typically ends with 5 cards, which is the exact same as you started with, right? But there are 2 caveats to that. One, you have a Parlor in your hand, which restarts your entire advantage engine. You have a House Dragonmaid in your graveyard that can be summoned off a chamber, and you should have a chamber in your graveyard. So you can immediately pop a monster that your opponent summons, because they tend to only be able to get 1 or 2 monsters on the field during the battle phase. Destroy it with House Dragonmaid's effect, and then House VFD and Dragonmaid Lorepar, which is also searched as a part of the combo, can an OTK your opponent right there. And that's just the bare minimum of what you can do, because you also have Nurse in your graveyard, so you can dump a Tidying Reborn Nurse to get Chamber, and you can flood the board with card advantage turn 3 and kill your opponent, all because you were able to stall them out turn 1 with True King of All Calamities. So that's why I think VFD is very powerful in this deck specifically. I don't think VFD as an end board himself is very strong. We've seen that Numeron doesn't necessarily do very well because Zexal does not win the game by himself. And Calamities, the same thing is true, but those are because those decks end up putting it in decks like Altergeist or like Guru, who don't provide inevitability as efficiently as something like Dragonmaid. I hate to say that to the players of those decks. Being able to normal summon a Parlor and dump a Tidying to special summon a Nurse who can special summon a Chamber to search a Hospitality, like that sort of ceiling it's too high, right, for something like VFD to not VFD blanking your opponent for 1 turn to not immediately end in your victory, right? The only way your opponent could play out of that is if they're playing back row removal to stun you on the clapback, or they draw a very specific combination of outs to stop your VFD from resolving. And your VFD most likely is going to resolve for a multitude of reasons, because there are 3 cards in the format that can attempt to stop it. The first is Infinite Impermanence, cannot stop VFD. The reason for this is because if your opponent top decks an Infinite Impermanence, and you only have True King of All Calamities, you did not manage to make Spheres and True King, which is fine, it happens in some permutations. You just wait till your opponent commits to the board with any card. That's all you do. As soon as they normal summon, as soon as they set, they either pass their turn or VFD makes them pass. You will not get hit by this card unless your opponent fires 2 at you, right? But if your opponent is firing 2 Infinite Impermanence at your True King of All Calamities, that means they held 1 for your whole combo, and I don't think that's very logical at all, right? You probably would have gotten hit on your Romulus a lot sooner, or like your LP, or even your normal summon if your opponent doesn't necessarily know what they're doing. So I don't think that's very probable. If you get to this point, VFD tends to resolve. And let's say you end up in a situation where your opponent has the 2 Infinite Impermanence, right? Or like a Widow Anchor. Widow Anchor is a card that is basically impermanence. What you can do is, if you have Hieratic Seal of Heavenly Spheres, you can tribute it for cost and bounce VFD to dodge those cards, right? The effect will resolve, though to be fair, you wouldn't use this effect against Sky Striker. Sky Striker, you want Show, just because they're so spell and trap heavy. Their monster effects are potent, but I would say Show and Hieratic Seal are much better for just punishing Ray, like entirely. Because Sky Striker, if their first battle phase is their weakest, because that's where they need Hayate to resolve. So House Dragonmaid negating the Hayate, and then them tagging into the Ray, and Ray tagging into Kagari or whatever they want to, or Shizuku, the Ray won't make it out of the battle phase because House Dragonmaid will immediately be able to pop it, right? So you're safe, and it can't float twice. Aside from that Sky Striker matchup, if Gamma, let's say Gamma is the card that you fear your opponent has, they top deck the Gamma, it's the same principle, right? Wait till your opponent commits to their main monster zone, and then you True King. Gamma does absolutely nothing to stop you. And then when you start popping monsters to free up their board and the Gamma is live, Gamma is facing down a True King, a House Dragonmaid, and a Dragonmaid Lorepar all in attack mode ready to kill him. 3,000, 27, 3,000, that's game. So these cards don't really stop you. The only card that can stop you is Forbidden Droplet. This card presents a very unique issue, but there are some unique ways to counterplay, and it depends entirely on a couple things. If your opponent has Forbidden Droplet and they pitch a monster to stop your VFD, the principle is, this principle still holds the same, right? You still wait for them to commit to the board first, because if they commit to the board with their normal summon, they may not have another monster in their hand to discard for the droplets, right? But if you have Dragonmaid Tidying in your hand, if they shotgun the droplets on your VFD, you banish the Tidying and then chain VFD in response to the Tidying. This way, when your VFD gets hit, it still resolves, right? But let's say VFD went first, and Droplet is chained in response. If you have Hieratic Seal and Tidying the Grave, you can do the same play, right? You've activated VFD. You use Tidying in the Graveyard since your opponent didn't send a trap, and then you chain Hieratic Seal in response to Tidying, tribute itself, bounce VFD, and then VFD will resolve dodging the Forbidden Droplet, and you get to then special summon a dragon from your deck from the effect of Hieratic Seal, and your opponent basically can't play the game, right? And if they enter the battle phase on your 0 attack dragon, if it's a Dragonmaid, you basically just go +3 on them, right? So that's the biggest crime that you can do. So your VFD isn't necessarily all exposed in this deck. It just depends entirely on how your hand shapes out. You know, sometimes you may even have hand traps to really like pressure your opponent to the point where your VFD getting like hit with droplets ultimately didn't matter. They couldn't play out of it. You also have Trishula, the Dragon of Icy Imprisonment, which banishes a card from your opponent's extra deck, which can be critical again in some matchups. Getting rid of something like a Hauka Fibrax or even an opposing LP or an opposing Romulus. Romulus is probably my pick against the Dragon Link matchup. Being able to do that can like stun your opponent. When I dueled Ruben in our first round, I banished Romulus from his extra deck, and he immediately like scooped the game up right there, right? Because Romulus is the crux of all these dragon combos. It's actually not LP. LP kind of just makes it worse. But this card right here is actually pretty insane for what it does. So yeah, those are some of the benefits to the True King of All Calamities combo. It is a field blanket that allows you to plus on your opponent's turn. But let's move on to the combo display. I don't think I need to say much about the hand traps. The only 2 cards I would say you absolutely do not want to draw, not counting Driver Chan, is Tempest, Dragon Ruler of Storms. Drawing this means you can't banish it for Trishula, a Dragon of Icy Imprisonment, which sucks because you lose the +1 that comes from that. And then Black Dragon Collapse Serpent is incredibly difficult to make live if you draw it, because there's like no light targets that end up in the graveyard that frequently. But White Dragon is just a free extender as soon as you make Striker Dragon. So drawing this is fine, but you don't really want to draw this one. So these 2 I would hate to draw. Aside from that, you're fine opening any of these cards as long as you open at least one of these and one of these, and preferably 3 of these, just because of how the format's shaped up. Moving on to the side deck, I think so. The obvious answer here was right. Like I cited Lancia specifically for the dinosaur matchup. I don't like dinosaurs, but it's also just good against Dogmatica. You know, chain it to an invocation, and suddenly things just got weird for that board. I max out on back row removal. I played every single possible like big board back row dealt with card just because I don't like backup, right? Like I don't want somebody to set 5 and pass. And I'll admit, like that's kind of one of the downsides of playing a 60 card deck is you have to side so hard for those matchups in specific, and you may not see them. But if you see one and you maybe see a hand trap, you have so much gas from like 2 cards that it really ultimately still ends up in your favor, right? Like the fact that this deck can open Chaos Space, Effect Veiler, and a Trap card and go full combo is just crazy. Like the Trap card itself is an extender and it's removal, right? Like you can set this card and use it as interruption. If you don't want to go full combo, you can make Hieratic Seal, set this card, pass. You have 2 means of interrupting your opponent. So it's a really strong, unassuming mid-range board. And I think this deck is more mid-range combo than a full-on combo deck. The ceiling of this deck, I would say, is much lower than something like Dragon Link. But it has the same level of explosivity. The trade-off is, right, like what would be the point in playing a deck that's less explosive, that's equally explosive but with a lower ceiling to a deck that's infinitely more explosive, right, or with a higher ceiling? I would say it's because of the recursion. Dragon Link is a glass cannon, but is an incredibly resilient cannon, right? But it's still a glass cannon. If you can out the board, they typically can't come back from it, right? But in your case, right, we play so many extenders to make sure we get to where we're trying to go, not necessarily because we're trying to do something grand. The fact that you can open a Noctivision Dragon, this card basically says you don't have to use one of these cards, which means if you get hit with this boy, you can use one of these cards in combination with something like this to, you know, end on a show, like, or end on a Hieratic Seal, and then whatever hand traps you have in your hand. Like, there still are places for you to go, but we value the turn 3 rather than putting everything on board turn 1. That's why it's incredibly dangerous to enter the battle phase against this deck, because you might take a situation that's winning for you and make it a losing situation simply because I was able to add one of these 2 to my hand. This also has a very cute go second effect, so watch out for this card. It actually works on monsters unaffected by card effects, but that's not really in the metagame right now. I suppose if Masterpiece was legal, this card would be like the only hand trap that can stop that if it was, like, say, immune to monster effects and trap cards or like spell cards. So this card's actually really strong. It's a shame it's not a quick effect. Would be so much better if it was, but I mean, to the original point, right? Like, the deck is incredibly consistent. The extra deck is super straightforward, right? You play 1 Almirage, 1 Striker, LP, Pisty, Romulus. These are all part of the core combo. However, Crossroads Dragon and Almirage are specifically for the 3 dragon combo, as opposed to the 4 dragon combo, which doesn't actually use them at all. An interesting little package that I showed on my my PPG top is Twin Triangle Dragon. Because of how recursive your deck is, like how I said earlier, 1 Parlor, dumping a Tidying, get summon the Nurse, which gets the Chamber. You can then use these cards to ladder Twin Triangle Dragon, summon back Noctivision Dragon, or any level 7 or higher dragon, right? Noctivision is the best one because you get the draw card again. Make Nightmare Unicorn spin something, then make Access Cold Talker for 5,300, and Access Cold Talker clears the board alongside alongside Lorepar minimum is an OTK by itself, right? Whatever else you have is insane. What you can also do is you can use VFD again on your turn, so your opponent can't stun you with their monster effects, and then just use the VFD as material alongside the Unicorn and the Twin Triangle and Noctivision play to summon Access Code, clear the board, and then summon Lorepar and Access Code, run through, and your opponent can't use any monster effects to stop you. Call Light, no Nibiru, no Gamma. That's really what you want to call Light specifically, so that you don't get hit with Effect Veiler and Nibiru. Just to stop that right there. and you can get your OTK. And if let's say your opponent has Swift Scarecrow, sure, all right. You still have a Nurse Dragonmaid in the graveyard. You have a Dragonmaid changeover in the graveyard, and you have a Dragonmaid show in your extra deck, right? So you just play the game that way. And this card says get a free +2 every standby phase, +3 if you have Nurse in your graveyard. So your opponent very quickly starts losing the game with a combination of these two cards. This one stops them from getting advantage. This one overwhelms them by giving you so much, and that's including Hieratic Seal. So that's kind of the crux of this deck. I don't think anything else needs to be talked about specifically. House Dragonmaid, very important that since you properly summon her for VFD, you can immediately normal summon your, if let's say your opponent has nothing on board to stop you, immediately go to your battle phase after summoning Parlor and dumping Tidying, and banish the Tidying at the start of your battle phase to summon Nurse, who will then summon Chamber, and then Chamber will search Hospitality because her effect will go up, or you can search Tidying if you want to have one set. And then you can tag Chamber into House Dragonmaid, the one that you properly summoned, tag Parlor into Lore Par, and tag Nurse into Ernest, and kill your opponent with big beast sticks right there. Like you didn't need the access gold target play. You only do that if your opponent has back row that you want to deal with immediately, right? That's really the only reason you would even make that play. It's an OTK right there. Any monster they set won't live to the damage step for your first monster, because House will pop 2 of them. And unless I don't know what deck your opponent would be playing that can put 3 monsters on board without activating effects, right? Because Calamitous is going to say no. So, and that's more than 8,000 damage. So that's really like the main deck, and those are all the changes that I made. I think Dark Ruler No More is self-explanatory. Our ceiling is super high, so we don't really need droplets. But to be fair, like we don't have droplets money right now, so that's why I don't play it. But Dark Ruler No More is more than fine. It doesn't matter if you combo under a board, use your big monsters to run over it, and then make a VFD under them, and they're just like, what do I do on my turn, right? And then Lancia specifically for that. So let's move into the actual combo profile. So this is my 3-card Dragonmaid combo. Not 3-card, it's a 2-card combo, my 3 dragon combo. What I mean by 3 dragon, I'll show you in a minute. So the first thing we're going to do is normal summon Kitchen Dragonmaid, use her effect to search and send Nurse Dragonmaid. So the fact that we normal summon Kitchen Dragonmaid matters quite a bit, because now we can use her and any other Dragonmaid, because they all have 500 attack, to make Salamangreat Almirage. So what we do here is we use the Dragonmaid Hospitality to return the Dragonmaid Nurse, and we get the free Foolish deck thinning effect of Hospitality. This card is insane. Get the Ernest out, right? We don't want to draw that. It's done. So that's in the graveyard. Then we use Nurse's effect, targeting our kitchen. Nurse targets. Hospitality does not target though. And this is what I mean when I say 3 dragons, right? You have 3 dragons on board. Almirage is not a dragon, but Kitchen's initial normal summon counted as a dragon, and that is Almirage. So we put Almirage, we send Nurse to the graveyard and special summon Gar Dragon LP. Then we put Kitchen and Almirage to summon Crossroads Dragons. Again, we have no cards in our hand. Like, I wonder what we're going to discard for Dragon Ravine, because we need to use that card, right? Well, I'll show you. So we use LP's effect, Black Metal Dragon. I just want to say one thing. If you get Gammaed right here, or not Gammaed, if you get Ashed or Impermed or Effect Failured, you just make Hieratic Seal, right? And you end your turn, but in the ideal scenario, you would still have 3 cards in your hand to play through that. Or you have 3 hand traps in your hand to punish your opponent, and they now have 4 cards to deal with you, right? So you're taking hand traps isn't always the worst thing. Gamma hurts though, Ghost Ogre can hurt, but if you have Reborn cards, you can play through both of those by just making Hieratic Seal. So that's kind of like our plan B if some things go wrong, if we can't play out of it completely. Anyways, so we're gonna special summon Black Metal Dragon from our deck and send it to the graveyard to summon the Guard Dragon Pisty. Then we're going to use the effect of our Black Metal Dragon when it's sent to the graveyard to special summon, not special summon, to search Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon. This is our discard for a Dragon Ravine, and you might think I'm crazy, but yeah, it is. So we're going to send Black Metal Dragon, then we're going to, not Black Metal Dragon, we're going to send LB and Crossroads Dragon to the grave to link summon Dragoonity Knight Romulus. Romulus is going to search us our Dragon Ravine. These are our 2 cards. Mind you, we still have 3 cards in our hand that your opponent doesn't know what they are. We've done no discarding until now. Red Eyes goes to the graveyard, and we send either Parlor or Chamber. Doesn't matter which one. I prefer Parlor, mostly because of the turn 3 setup by dumping Tidying in the grave, but you could also send Chamber. You still have to search Change over the fusion spell. That's the only thing you can search on either of them. So I think Parlor being better for the turn 3 makes her the better candidate. But if your opponent has Nibiru, Changeover could be used twice if you searched it off of Chamber. But like, Parlor is probably better in most scenarios, since she's how you play on your opponent's turn. Then we're gonna special summon our Red MD off of Pisty, and then we're gonna link off Pisty and Heretic Seal for Romulus for Heretic Seal. This is kind of this is the standard combo. We want this card up as soon as possible, because if we get hit with that by Nibiru, he can like mitigate it by giving us a dragon, and that dragon could potentially give us 2 dragons depending on what it is. It could be a nurse. Like, we don't have nurse in the graveyard on this card. Oh, yes we do, but there are situations where you wouldn't need it to be nurse. It could be well, see, we have Red MD on board. Actually, it probably couldn't be a lot of things now that I think about it. That's only because we had to use Nurse for the kitchen permutation. But let's say we didn't need to do Nurse, we could summon Nurse off of this if we got Nibiru just for 2 free dragons, right? You won't always have to do Nurse, but for kitchen you do. One of the reasons I don't like her, but I mean, she's still a really good card, so I still play her. Then we use Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon's effect to summon Dragonmaid Parlor from the graveyard. And so Parlor's going to activate her effects, and you're going to dump Dragonmaid Changeover. Then we're going to activate the graveyard effect of Dragonmaid Changeover, returning itself and Parlor Dragonmaid to the hand. Interesting side note, this card returns itself to the hand regardless of what happens to the monster. So let's say your opponent hits the monster with like a Zodiac Trident effect. Parlor will be destroyed, but Changeover still returns to your hand, which is really good. There are situations where you can still potentially do a fusion play and like punish your opponent for making that decision. But that's just tech. It's important, but that's not relevant to the combo. So next we use Dragonmaid Changeover using Parlor and Red MD as fusion material for Dragonmaid Shell. And here's your board. This is the end of the combo. It looks unassuming, but remember, we still have 3 cards in hand. Right? These 3 cards can be anything. Your opponent does not know what these are. You did not use them. They had no relevance. Chaos Space changes things dramatically just because of the kind of card it is, right? And it is live because Nibiru is in your hand. So your starting hand would have been Kitchen, Hospitality, Chaos Space, a second Hospitality, and Nibiru. So you have extension, right? You could take a hand trap and keep going. And I think that's a very important part of playing a combo deck. And while some people like to play Dragonmaid as a control deck, I think that's a little bit wrong. Only because if your fear is that you get hit by a hand trap, the solution is to play cards that help you play through or around hand traps, right? It's not to default to a deck with an infinitely lower ceiling that becomes even more vulnerable to hand traps as a result. You don't get killed by Nibiru, but you get killed by Harpy Feather Duster or Lightning Storm or Evenly Matched. Like, these are things that you have to consider when deciding how you want to play Dragonmaid. So that's why I think most Yugi tubers who pick up this deck are playing it incorrectly. I think we all need to accept the fact that they are dragons. You know, there's some videos like Mega Capital G will say, you don't really need guard dragons. Like, yeah, you don't need guard dragons. That's why you play them. They only help you, right? It doesn't make sense to walk away from a resource just because it's similar to something else, right? This may not be Dragon Link, but it's still incredibly potent. So, rant aside, like, that's the end of the combo. On the follow-up turn 3, you're going to use, during your opponent's standby phase, you use Show's effect to special summon Nurse, then use Nurse's effect to special summon Parlor, and use Parlor's effect to dump Tidy. And you've just gone +4, +2. And if you enter the battle phase, you get Earnest, you go +3. If you use Erratic Seal's effect and you special summon Chamber, Search Hospitality, you've gone +5. Like they snowball so quickly. It's your opponent. It's actually +6 because you're bouncing something your opponent has, and if it's an extra deck monster, you bounce 2 cards essentially. It's just so resilient and it's super powerful. 3 hand traps suck. That's kind of how I lost to Ruben. And sometimes you get very weird hands that don't play out the best way. But the fact of the matter is, I could do, if my combo was just these 3 cards, I could still do it. Like, ignoring everything we've done so far. And I think that's really strong. Having very recursive, self-contained combos. Anyway, we're going to move on to the next combo. This is the advanced level combo. This is the one that I think is probably the reason people have a negative, I wouldn't say a negative look on my deck. I think I get a lot of Dragon Link vibes from people, and I totally get it. The start of the combo will be incredibly Dragon Link, right? But I promise it pivots to Dragonmaid in a very unique way that Dragon Link doesn't, and your entire grind game will be built on your Dragonmaid cards. Which kind of goes back to what I was saying, right? Like, we use Dragon Link's cards because they're explosive, and then we use the Dragonmaid cards because they're recursive. So it gives us the grind game that we otherwise would not have had, and I think that's a very potent idea for deck building. It's also just different. Like, your opponent doesn't necessarily know what your Dragonmaid cards do. They just know what the Dragon Link one does. So you can really one-up some people. House Dragonmaid being a level 9 and dropping VFD is an incredible surprise that people aren't always prepared about. You know, there's no Link Ross needing the Crocosaur, none of that. This is a dragon deck, and I think it's dragons as they should have been played, as opposed to using all these Hauki Fryback stuff that I really don't think all should have been in one deck. I think LP and Romulus is too much as it is, let alone Hulk and Link Ross coming in. So hopefully the ban list deals with those 2 cards and leaves LP and Romulus alone. But I know I'm completely biased in saying that. But hey, I want my deck to be good. What can I say? Anyway, let's get into this. This is the 4-card combo, the one that results in the VFD. This can be done in a multitude of ways, but I think this is the way with the highest ceiling, mostly because of when you normal summon in this combo. So let's get this underway. Our starter for today is going to be Chaos Space and Effect Failure. So we're gonna activate Chaos Space and we're gonna dump Effect Failure. Insert Black Dragon Collapse Serpent. Banish the Effect Failure to summon our Collapse Serpent and make Striker Dragon. Then we use the effect of our Collapse Serpent to search White Dragon Wyvern Buster. Then we banish the Collapse Serpent to summon said White Dragon, and we use the effect of Chaos Space by banishing itself to return Collapse Serpent to the deck, which is an important part of this combo for what happens later. And it's also just a free draw, right? Next, we're going to link off our Collapse Serpent, not Collapse Serpent, our Wyvern Buster and Burster and Striker Dragon for Romulus. And we search Dragon Ravine, right? So you're looking at this hand and like, there's no Monster Reborn card in here. Like, where do we go? We just have a Dragon Ravine. What do? Well, we activate Dragon Ravine and we pitch Dragonmaid Tidying, as I said before. Send Chamber Dragonmaid. Chamber Dragonmaid searching Hospitality means she's 2 dragons, right? So we banish Tidying, summon Chamber, search Hospitality, make the LP. Then activate Hospitality, summon the same Chamber, and we make the Pisty. We haven't even normal summoned yet, just saying, right? Technically, we don't really have a very potent normal summon, but that'll change. Then we special summon the Parlor Dragonmaid from the deck, and this is where we dump the changeover. Well, I added it, but I meant to dump it, right? Then we activate the changeover and put the Parlor in our hand. So at this point, we started with 5 cards, right? Let's see where we are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We've gone, oh man, we've gone +6. That's pretty crazy, right? And we're not done. We're gonna keep going. So next, we're gonna use the Pisty effect, special summon the Striker Dragon. Then we're gonna use all three to summon Trishula, Dragon of Icy Imprisonment. Now, see, I want to deviate from the main combo for one reason, to show you guys something, right? This part of the combo is very important because it determines where your end board can go. This combo path doesn't necessarily, unlike the last combo path, there was no opportunity to pivot into a VFD play. You had to commit to Fears and Hermetic Spheres and Show because of the way we set up our monsters and our link zones, right? But in this combo, you can go in either direction and you get to decide as soon as you activate Changeover for the final time, right? Trishula's going to activate right now, and she's going to banish Tempest. Tempest will activate its effect, and it'll search a Wind Dragon. We already have Parlor, so we search Lorepar, right? This means we can just use Changeover, Parlor, and Lorepar to make Show, and use Trishula and Romulus for Spheres. We literally end up at the exact same board as we did last time, but we're going to go further than that, right? Because we can. So we're going to use Changeover, Collapse Serpent, Lorepar for House Dragonmaid. Then we can make our True King of All Calamities, and we normal summon our Parlor, because we haven't done that yet, right? We haven't used our normal summon. And we use Parlor and Romulus for Hermetic Spheres. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6 cards, right? And Hermetic Spheres pluses for us. If your opponent doesn't play a card that can be bounced, you bounce Dragon Ravine, and then you go into your deck and you special summon a Parlor for a Tidying, or you special summon a Chamber for a Hospitality. Your advantage engine doesn't end. It just keeps going. And I think that's incredibly potent. So that's why I think True King of All Calamities as a solo board actually works in Dragonmaid as opposed to other decks. But that's the end of the combo. It's pretty underwhelming for our deck size, right? But that's kind of like the point. It was never about making this big bombastic board that Dragonmaid makes, with your Buster Locker. I'm sure I could do that, but I don't think any of that is necessary, right? It's making sure I can do this guy with as much protection as I need in case he fails, right? Because these hand traps could do it for me. This is 3 interruptions right here, and this guy just says you can't use monster effects. So I think that kind of board is better than, like, what the difference between a Borreload Savage Dragon and like an Ash Blossom is. Savage can negate like an evenly matched, right? But I'm not worried about evenly matched. You revealed evenly matched on me, cool, I'm going to chain my spheres, bounce my Dragon Ravine, and then banish the Imperm. You still can't use monster effects, and then evenly matched gets sent to the graveyard, and spheres triggers, and I special summon it, and my advantage engine just does what I was going to do. I literally only lost the impermanence. So it did not matter, right? Like, Savage would literally just be an Ash Blossom in that case, or an effect failure. It would just negate something. So I don't see the need to play a monster that a hand trap could facilitate. Dragon Link kind of needs that because they don't have Show, but I have Show, and Show is better than Savage Dragon, at least in my deck, because she's a negate that destroys, that also goes +2 during every standby phase. So it's really just that simple. And let's go back to the deck. So yeah, that's pretty much my deck profile and combo tutorial, as well as my overall thoughts on this style of playing Dragonmaid. I think this is the direction we were supposed to go with this deck. It's clear through the amount of reborn effects, Dragonmaid Hospitality, the fact that these two can search Hospitality or Tidying, Tidying being able to banish and special summon, Nurse special summons from Chambers, not Nurse, Show special summons, Foolish Burial Good essentially being more copies of Tidying or Changeover depending on the situation. Like, this felt like the way the deck was supposed to be played, and and I don't think shoving 30 big dragons in your deck and a bunch of normal summons that need 3-card combos to just do the simplest of play was what was intended. And I'm very surprised nobody really decided to try and pierce this deck's ceiling before I got around to doing it. This deck gets a negative review. And you know, like, MBT did a video for Dragonmaids, and it wasn't, I mean, I love his content, right, but it wasn't good. He had his extra deck had no focus. He was missing a bunch of cards that mattered. He was just summoning guard dragons to summon the guard dragons, but he didn't know where he was trying to go with it. Like, if you're building a deck, the first thing you need to figure out is what you're trying to do. For me, it was show, and then eventually it was spheres, then it was spheres and show, and then it was VFD, and it's only been those three, and my boards compensate for that, right? I try to do it with as little amount of cards as possible. There aren't any 1 cards that can pull it off, but there are a myriad of 2 cards that can, so I can stuff my deck with good stuff options to protect myself. I think that's how you're supposed to approach deck building. It's okay to go past the 40-card limit in a combo deck. If you're playing a control deck, you obviously don't want to do that. You want to see your one-to-one interactions more often than extenders. But in a combo deck, your extenders eat one-to-one interactions. Like, an Ash Blossom doesn't mean anything on my chamber if I have Noctivision Dragon in my hand or World Legacy Guard Dragon. It doesn't. We bypass it. And that's why extenders are a very important part of combo decks. And you want to have a healthy balance of extenders, starters, and hand traps. Again, the only problem I think is the lack of... I probably should dedicate like my entire side to back row. I wouldn't be surprised if I saw myself putting in Twin Twisters or like Cosmic Cyclones just to make sure I have like mass back row removal for those matchups. But like the thought process literally stays the same, right? Like 60-card combo decks are the way to play your combo decks if your combo deck is consistent. If you have 2-card combos, I would suggest doing this. We've seen it with Dragon Link, we're seeing it with Infernal Knight, even Dinosaurs occasionally when they want to play combo deck, they go 60 cards. Like, it's okay to play over the 40 limit. Anyways, guys, I'm super sorry for rambling. This is my first time doing such a thing, and this lasted quite a while, but I think it was important. I think Dragonmaid is completely underrated. This deck is dangerous. If you run up on it and the first thing you do is fire your only piece of interaction at the normal summon and don't consider what the other 4 cards in their hand does, you're probably going to lose the game right there. You need to remember that they're not just waifus, they're also dragons, and dragons are strong. So hopefully today I've stated my case on the facts. I've showed my combos, I've showed all the tricks up my sleeve, I've given my analysis on everything. I don't think I forgot anything. Anyways, if you guys have any questions for me, leave a comment, like, subscribe if you want to see more Dragonmaid innovation. I'm going to be on this train until the day that this is my deck. Dragonmaid is for me. I'm going to see it through. For better or for worse. If LP ends up getting banned next list, I'm gonna be figuring out what to do. Even if we've got to play the control list, we'll find a way. But I promise you, right, this deck will not be dead as long as I'm working on it. So that said, you guys have a fantastic day and take care.